Thank you, Georgia, for introducing us. What Andrea and I want to do in the next 10 minutes is to give you 2 examples of pilot projects and how you can evolve to planning and regulation for logistics. So I'm going to start with my example from Mechelen. First of all, I quickly want to introduce my city. Mechelen is a medium-sized European city situated between Antwerp and Brussels. We have a typical medieval town center with narrow streets and fairly difficult to organize traffic therein. We have around 85,000 inhabitants for over 1,000 shops. We already have a sump installed, but not a sulp yet, so a sump. And the sump is focused on low car and car-free zones, and where we work with time frames for delivery. How are these zones being monitored? They are being monitored with ANPR cameras. ANPR stands for Automatic Number Plate Recognition. So if you drive in these zones as a logistics service provider out of the time frames, there's a photo taken of you and you're fined. To conclude the short presentation of the city, we have the ambition of also installing a low emission zone by 2021. What are our issues then in this city? I just put here some photographs to make it more visual for you. This, for example, we have a shopping triangle, you could say. It are 3 streets that are attached to each other in a triangle, and in one of those streets, it's not a car-free zone yet. There are no loading or unloading parking spaces. So what happens if a logistics service provider has to deliver goods? He just parks in the street and he causes a congestion. So that is one of our main issues on urban freight. We are faced with congestion, with no policy on loading and unloading. And we also have a big ambition on sustainability. We want to reduce our CO2 emissions. What is in the process to come to city logistics planning? What is our main overall goal? You could say that we want to, as Marianne from Brussels said, we want to become a livable, pleasant, sustainable and reachable city. And as Marianne already said, to combine livable with reachable, it's a difficult task, because livable means that there are nice shopping streets, terraces, etc. But reachable means also that logistics service provider need to be able to deliver their goods. So, difficult task. How did we proceed then in making city logistics planning? How did we proceed? We became partner in the novelog-project. And the tools and support of novelog helped us to be able to evolve to a SULP. But I want to say, today we are not there yet. So as said, we were a partner in novelog-project. What was the first step to take was to map our goods flows. So we had to collect data and analyze it. We have 3 data sources, as already said, the ANPR cameras. We also have a data source called OBU. OBU stands for onboard units, and trucks for over 3.5 tons are obliged to have that unit because there's a tax on the driven kilometers for these trucks. So that's also a good source of data. And then we were able to obtain 2 data sets of 2 logistics service providers who give their GPS data. But yet again, we're not there yet. It was a lot of lobbying and talking and informing. So we're now up at the level that we will finally obtain these data sets and that we will be able to do the analysis. And then, as already said numerous times during this conference, and it is one of the backbone items too in the novelog approach, is the involvement of stakeholders. We didn't have a network yet in Mechelen, so participating in Novelog gave us the chance to start talking with all the implied stakeholders. We held a business model session of Novelog. We did interviews with shop owners to obtain their distribution profiles. We did a session on alternative distribution scenarios with all the implied stakeholders. So we took a numerous of initiatives to imply the stakeholders. But then, yeah, that's a lot of talking, a lot of theory. To be able to evolve to a SULP, you also have to take action. And that is why we have developed a couple of pilot projects. I will just present you one of these pilot projects. And that is the pilot project of the lockers. In the session that we organized for alternative distribution scenarios, a system of lockers was well evaluated by the different stakeholders. So we had a kind of theoretical support to start with these lockers. What was the goal for us to experiment with lockers? It was to see if lockers could have an impact on urban distribution. Is it an instrument that helps us to reduce the number of vehicles and to reduce the number of goods delivery? And with lockers, the focus lies on e-commerce flows. So all these online ordered goods that are being delivered at people's homes. With the locker, we give them an alternative. We see that with e-commerce flows, there are a lot of failed deliveries because persons aren't at home at the time of delivery. So the locker is a solution to avoid the failed delivery in e-commerce. We also wanted to test if it is a mean to use it as a conservation of goods so that people amongst each other could exchange goods. So I put something in the locker so that Andrea can come and pick it up 2 days after. And then we also thought a locker could also be a solution for shop owners that are situated in the car-free zone. They can be delivered between 11 and 6. And maybe the logistics service provider could then deliver in a locker just outside of the car-free zone. And then a bike courier could come and collect the goods and deliver it to the shop owner. So that were a bit our goals to test. What was our approach? Small means we had a budget of 6,000 euros within the project. We tendered and we finally selected the supplier Bring Me. We tested for 6 months on 2 locations. The final results is that we could say that we have around 100 deliveries per week in the locker. We have almost 300 users. And we calculated that it could be a potential saving of a small 2,000 rides per year. So it's on a small scale that we tested, but it learned us that it can have an impact on numbers of kilometers driven, on failed deliveries, and on CO2 emission. So that in short what we have been doing. If you're curious about knowing more, there's a poster of Mechelen downstairs, or just ask me. Thank you. I give the word to Andrea.
Thank you very much, Veerle. I will not talking about Rome, since the history of Rome is quite ancient. So I will stick to the point of introducing an example, a tool, let's say, on how to plan a solution, a city logistics solution. To be honest, I must admit that it is the 7th, 8th occasion in which somebody said there's a lack of data, okay? So I think that one point of this conference is the obsession of data. Yes, I agree with this, but we should find out also solutions. I have also to say that Rome has made in the last 20 years 2 big surveys on urban freight transport. The first in 1998, the second I managed together with the municipality agency for mobility in 2008. So at 10 years difference, in order to understand in the very center of Rome, we are talking about 35,000 trucks per day who are entering to serve in the city, the effect of regulation, and find out other solutions. I had also the occasion, together with Mr. Surace here, present, who represents Rome, to work in a, let's say, a free quality partnership. It is established by from 4 or 5 years in order to find out how to solve problem, but introducing the planning tool solutions for city logistics with the involvement of stakeholders, but starting from a real, actual, and useful knowledge on data, on what is happening. Because the very important thing is not just making surveys, but to have to be aware of what doing with data you collect. And another point, but this is also has been confirmed by other colleagues, is that stakeholders are fundamental to be involved, mainly because their objectives are contradictory. They are in a conflict. Because, you know, from one side, the public means public institutions want reduce CO2. But as my colleague before showed, private operators want money to grow up. So it's a 2 point very different. This is something that we developed in a novelog-project and we implemented in Rome. But first of all, any municipality needs something, a tool, a procedure, a process for planning something solutions. At the very first part, to be aware of UFT, urban freight transport problems, understanding of characteristics, because not all the shipments, not all deliveries are the same, have the same value, have the same operators, have the same distribution chain, and some add the same added value and the same cost, is to realize predictability. So first of all, data are to be collected and understood in order to have predictability on the effect on what I want to test on policies. Then I need tools to plan and control. Because planning is not sufficient. You need to implement, you need to test, but you need to control and in some cases to enforce, otherwise things will not changing. So this is a process, a logical process of predict, plan and control based on data collection. What we developed in Rome is let's say a procedure, a tool, let's say, a decision support system that is something like software tool, okay, that can be supporting public decision makers, having an ex-ante assessment on the policies. So I want to introduce in the planning of the city. The layout is you collect data. So you have a lot of data. We have databases, I said, 2 surveys at 10 years different. And we are counting more than 2,000-3,000 of interviews collected to retailers, shop owners, and transport operators. And some years ago, we did another in-depth analysis of a specific central area in order also to understand likely trends. And this data need to be also structured. We developed in Novelog a sort of data framework Georgia introduced yesterday. Yes, and then the very engine of the DSS, that is a twofold approach, because you cannot evaluate a private approach using models. You use models, this is a position such as city goods, freight urban class that are freight transport modeling to have flows analysis, environmental pollutions estimations, and all the stuff that usually our researchers are doing. But at the same time, you should evaluate city logistics solutions and their effect on the basis of a private approach. This is a very involving and attracting for stakeholders. So city logistics is not a problem, it's a business opportunity. That is the point. And in the very end, you can put all the knowledge you develop based on data to elaborate a sort of win-win public-private cooperative approach. Using LSI Logistics Sustainability Index, that was in the pilot we did, in order to have a summary indicator showing the effect of the introduction of, the after situation on a before situation of the city logistics solutions. I'm not going to explain this, but this is a picture on the system, the DSS and all the system that the Mobility Agency of Rome has already in place. I just want to highlight, because I think it's not readable, the green part. The green part is the headings we did for freight. So all these geographical data sets are collected. We introduced the collection of logistics data, and there also a production in the indicator system. It is already in place. So this comes from the Mobility Agency, and this is the implementation. Just examples of research. It is important to collect trip movements, but it's not sufficient without the knowledge of the dimension of the shipment. It was very interesting this morning to understand the U-turn, what they did, because they collected the dimension of the shipments from the shippers. This is fundamental, otherwise you cannot combine the dimensional volumes that are coming out. Last thing is that this is the before-after evaluation using the LSI, that is a summary indicator, showing the increase, so the benefit, and according to 7th evaluation criteria of the introduction of the new measure. Just an example, sorry, because I have short time, of all the process and the fact that all these models, methods, and the stakeholders' involvement have to be put together according on a linear process from the bottom, so from the data collection, up to the data analysis, presentation, and after that engagement of stakeholders. Conclusions?
Yeah, we will conclude together. So, yeah. So we gave you 2 examples on how you can evolve to planning, to a SELP. What are the main messages that we want you to remember? That is, first of all, creation of awareness is key. Internally and externally, you need to create involvement. Second of all, as a city administration, it is very important that you give the good example. So start, if you're a city administration, first look at your own organization and lead as an example. And go for a bottom-up approach. Don't be scared to test things, even if it are really small actions with only one shop owner and one courier. Start testing.
Third point, data are needed, but also the process on how to interpret data and how to use data within a stakeholders' involvement is fundamental. Otherwise, you waste a lot of money collecting data. Technology, future technology can support, but I must admit that if we don't have, as happens in maritime transport, on air cargo transport, an electronic document, also on truck shipment, it will be quite impossible to collect information from private operators. This will be very useful in order to include vehicular technology, so interpretation on positions and movement with the cargo already moved. This will be very supporting for planning. Thank you very much.